Well, we shared the story with you of more than 6,000 businesses being assisted with over 58 billion rand in funding. This announcement was made by the Small Business Development Minister, Stella and Ndabeni-Abrahams, and this was since the introduction of the Spaza Shop Support program. To discuss further, as well as also to get some commentary on the U-turn on the exemption for Eskom in terms of its declaration on its financials, I'm joined by Tebogo Klaas, who's CEO of the Chartered Entrepreneurs and President of Public Interest SA. Good evening to you and welcome. This is a space, we'll start off with the Spaza Shop and the investment into what's termed the township economy. It's a space you're deeply familiar with. Your thoughts on the announcement that was made?
Yes, thanks for having me. Imam, the question is, according to Nielsen study that was done released sometime last year, mid last year, there's over 150,000 Spaza shops in South Africa. Now, if 10,000 applied, which makes it less than 10%, and only 6,000 of them, or around 6,000 of them, were granted, it means a paltry number of Spazas either were able to apply or knew about this scheme, or were interested at all, or had the means to actually even apply. What begs the question is, what happened to the rest? Were the rest of the Spaza shops okay, they didn't need any assistance? One. And then secondly, what motivated government, or what criteria did government use to grant the kind of assistance to the 6,000? We do know for a fact that there was some exclusions. For example, if your Spaza shop was repairing TVs, radios, phones, or whatever it is, you would have been excluded. So what is the definition of a Spaza? Is it only those that sell perishables? Is it only those who sell who retail food, or would a Spaza shop also include those that are not necessarily selling the kind of items that I've just mentioned? I think government ought to come out clearly and explain what it is that qualification criteria they use and the methodology they use to access this funding.
In a conversation with the minister yesterday on the criteria that was used and what research was used to underpin how the exclusions or inclusions and the qualifying criteria would have been made, the minister, directed us to studies that would have been done in research procured by SIFA, for example, who is one of the DFIs that are involved in the space. From what you're saying, Tebogo, it gives the sense that both the government policy and position in terms of the action that they've now taken is not very well informed.
I doubt it, Iman. And look, it's well-intentioned, but whether the efficacy of this intervention will be realized to the extent that it could have been, it is open to debate. But what we know for a fact is that it is a fact that they haven't reached all the Spazas, or to the extent that the Spaza would have wished to have access to this. And also, listen to this. They took some of I think about 100 million of that was diverted to disaster relief. You ask yourself, why was that allocation rerouted to disaster relief in KZN? And yet we still don't even have reports as to what exactly was used to help SMEs who are affected by disaster in the KZN area. So we still believe that government could and should have done more and can still do more to ameliorate the adverse impact that SMEs find themselves in for various reasons. But what is also reminds us is what happened with the COVID relief fund. You remember how disastrous that was, where the banks were tasked with distributing or making access to COVID relief fund. It failed. I think it was about an amount of, I can't remember how many billions. It failed. There was no uptake. Less than 5% of that was actually disbursed. So we asked ourselves, what is it that government was trying to achieve out of this? Or was it just another exercise of dispensing money and patronage?
Again, as you share further, it certainly seems to ring a little more hollow, pardon me, in terms of the dispersion of those funds, who's included, and this wide gap that exists between them and those who still exist in the space who operate Spaza shops. I'll share with you one of the conversation threads in response to what we shared on our social media around this announcement was that there was this concern expressed that were these genuine, if the intention was to empower South African-owned Spaza shops, provide sustainable support that would allow their businesses to thrive into the future, there was a sense that, there was a lot of fronting, and it's something the Minister acquiesced to yesterday. How rife would you say this is in the space? And again, share with us some data around the true profile of ownership, particularly when it comes to Spaza shops.
I'm glad you're raising that. In fact, I saw some reports over the weekend. I can't remember exactly which publication it was, but it was claimed that Spaza shops that were owned by foreigners, especially Pakistanis, would have fared around number 5. I can't remember what the numbers were. But most of the Spaza shops were owned by South Africans, and then followed by Zimbabweans and then Mozambicans and so forth. But you ask yourself, even those Spaza shops that are purportedly owned by South Africans, in the majority, it is owned by South Africans on paper. Oftentimes you find that it has been leased to a foreigner who then runs the Spaza shop. Then you ask yourself, what checks and balances were made to ensure that that relief package went to where it is needed? Or was it only going to the owner of the Spaza on paper without really filtering through to the real owner or manager of the Spaza? So that is another question. Obviously, government wouldn't have the means to scrutinize all that. And also an important factor is that we've got an ID system that is also compromised. So it is very well easy for somebody to claim South African citizenship, especially in the Spaza environment, when they actually are not even South African. So it is left to anybody's imagination as to what amount was actually filtered through to the real owners of Spazas and the efficacy thereof, and which is, the jury will be out on that. You will never get any answers, I doubt, on that score.
Certainly worth another debate, another round of debate and discussion on a really important segment of the South African economy and an as yet unanimated or under-animated engine room for economic growth and a contributor to our country's GDP. Tebogo Klaas, thank you for your analysis and your input. We appreciate it tonight.